Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth session of American English Live Teacher Development Series 5. My name is Lauren, and I'll be filling in as host today. I'm excited to be here with you all, as are my colleagues behind the scene, Abigail and Heather, who will be serving as moderators to help answer your questions and respond to your comments during the session. Today, I'll be talking with our presenter, Richard Kahn, about how to use critical thinking activities to promote grammar and vocabulary learning. So let's get started. First, we'd like to give everybody a warm welcome and thank you for joining us today, especially our first-time viewers. It's great to be with you all. Let's start with these great photos featuring teachers from the American Corner Pristina viewing group. We love to see teachers learning and sharing ideas and using the strategies presented in AE Live sessions in their classrooms. So please be sure to share your photos with us by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org or by sharing them on our social media page. If you do share to social media, make sure to tag us at American English for Educators so that we can see all of your posts, and we may even feature one of your photos in an upcoming session. Today, we'll examine critical thinking and grammar and vocabulary instruction. And in our final session of the series, we'll explore learner motivation. Have you had a favorite topic so far? Let us know in the chat box. We look forward to learning with you for the remainder of the series, and we hope that you will be able to use the practical ideas shared here in your classrooms. So here's a little about what to expect. Each session is approximately 60 minutes long and is often related to an American English e-teacher massive open online course or a Teacher's Corner theme on the American English website. The presenter will share the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments too. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience. So please be sure to share your ideas and comments and questions in the chat box so that we can feature them throughout the session. When our session comes to a close in about an hour, you will have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the session, we'll share a link in the comments and at the top of this post. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. And once you have successfully passed the quiz, you can expect to receive your badge via email from badger@badger.io in about a week. Have you ever taken an American English e-teacher MOOC or global online course? These university-level online courses, sponsored by our office here at the U.S. Department of State, give teachers like you the opportunity to develop professionally and advance their careers. Our next self-paced MOOC starts on July 8th, and we do hope you'll join us there. There are other ways to participate in the e-teacher program, so please take a look at the links shared on this slide for more information. And now for today's session, making grammar and vocabulary learning stick by weaving a critical thinking web. If you, as many teachers, think that critical thinking can come only after all the language learning basics have been mastered, then this interactive session will challenge that idea. Learners have complex minds. Critical thinking activities engage more of their brain's interconnections. As a result, new words and grammatical patterns stick and become more available for productive language learning. This webinar will show some ways to weave grammar and vocabulary objectives into that interconnected web. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Richard Kahn. Before Richard ever went to university, he sought to educate himself. He traveled through South America and Africa, where he learned how to learn languages and cultures from everyone from children to elders. These experiences informed his later teaching in a US prison and 3 universities, and then in Central Asia, North Africa, and South America. He was a US Department of State English Language Fellow in Algeria and Morocco, and he was a specialist in Bolivia. His workshop topics range from energizing academic writing to harnessing the richness of large multi-level class diversity. Whatever the subject, he taps into the renewable resource that is available in all teachers and in all students. the capacity for critical thinking. So welcome, Richard.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren. And I am really delighted to be here with all of you today. And I am excited to get started, so let's go.
Let's do it.
Okay, so just so we get a little oriented, I am right now deep in rural United States, and I'm surrounded by farms and hills in a place called Danville in the state of Pennsylvania. But even here in the country, I'm really not so far from either New York City or Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. So now you know where I am. I am really curious to know about you. Where are you? Enter into the chat box and let us know where you are right now.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from everybody. Please let us know where you're joining us from today. All right. We have participants from all over, from China, Kazakhstan, Russia, Peru, Bolivia, lots of responses.
Kazakhstan, Bolivia, just naming these places, they're like putting delicious flavors in my mouth that give me an appetite to see more of the world. So thank you very much for being here in this world on this web with us, and we're going to try to weave together some new understandings of each other and the possibilities for English learning. So let's move on, and here is a quick overview. We're going to be focusing on those last two items, practical activities that we can use for using critical thinking to improve vocabulary and to improve grammar learning. Now, I really do appreciate this time we have together because, well, we're all professionals who understand the many pleasures and the many challenges of teaching English. And it can sometimes seem that we're climbing a steep mountain, carrying on our backs a strong sense of responsibility for our learners' success. And we're trained to help our students climb that mountain of skills one step of the curriculum at a time. Now, many of us have seen Bloom's taxonomy there on the right, which presents an image of a hierarchy, that is, an ordered list of the kinds of thinkings that learners use to gain understanding and mastery of skills. So now at the top of that hierarchy, we see analysis, evaluating, and creating. And these are usually considered the key critical thinking skills. But because Dr. Bloom put them at the top of his pyramid, we often accept, really without much question, that these powerful higher level thinking skills are only reached after first dragging ourselves and our students through all the rocky lower level thinking at the base. And yes, it does seem like common sense that students need that solid base of knowledge before they can begin analyzing or synthesizing. And of course, it seemed logical that students need to know rules backward and forward before we let them question why. It seems as natural as mountains, that basic skills must be fully mastered before learners can begin to create new things. So if Bloom's mountain of thinking skills shows critical thinking like analysis, synthesizing, creating at the very top, what English language level do you think your students need to achieve before we can expect critical thinking from them?
All right, everybody, we want to hear from you in the chat box. What level of English skills do you think learners need before they are ready to use critical thinking? Okay, we have people saying an average amount, that they need to be able to understand the language, that they need to have basic language skills. Lots of people are saying, like just a basic amount of skills.
Okay, and that's why I frequently hear that the idea that we need to have at least basic skills, and that makes perfect sense. It's very logical. But here's the problem that I see. If we keep waiting for our students to master those basic skills, we may never think our students are ready for critical thinking because those basic skills take a lot of work. And what does basic really mean? So we end up with a problem there. And I would say that without using our learners' critical thinking skills, we're not using the most powerful tool their brains have to master those basic skills. So if you remember anything from this webinar, I hope it will be that critical thinking is not up at the top of a learning hierarchy. It's rather part of a learning cycle. Now, when we thought about this question, when are students ready for critical thinking, we took a step back to think about what we usually do and think about why we do it. Now, we call this stepping back reflection. And reflection is itself an exercise of critical thinking. As in this very strange picture, we don't always see what we expect to see. Reflection helps us realize what we know and what we need to know, and realize some of the things we've never even thought about before. It helps us understand how complex and sometimes really how simple our problems are. If, for example, we worry that our students are not learning and remembering enough vocabulary, do we even know the size of the problem? Do we know how many words they need, or even how many words are there in the English language? So here's a question. How many words does English have? Now, no one has counted them, so give your very best guess.
All right, everybody, we'd love to see your guesses. How many words do you think are in the English language? Fatima says thousands, and we have a lot of people typing in, hundreds of thousands, 55 million, lots of different ranges here.
So that's great. I mean, that's a kind of funny thing where you have enough confidence to make a guess about something that you don't have an exact answer for. And these things are kind of refreshing. But let's take a look about what one possible answer is. Judging from the number of definitions in the Oxford English Dictionary, all 22 volumes of it, we count about 600,000 entries that we can all call words.
Wow, that's a lot.
Wow. But don't panic or despair. Thank goodness no one can or needs to know all of them to know English. But if not all, how many words do we need to know to say we know English? Luckily, with only about 5,000 word families, researchers estimate that we can understand 98% of normal text. Now, a word family, what I mean by that is a root word with all its inflections, such as run has in the family runs and running, okay? Now, and it also turns out that if we know those 98% of ordinary text with its 5,000 words, we can very accurately guess the other 2%. So that's most likely, we go a long way with those 5,000 word families. Now, by the way, if you want to estimate the size of your own vocabulary, you can go to this site. I thought it was kind of fun to do. It's a very quick little test, testyourvocab.com, but not now. Well, you do it later. Okay. So the thing is that even 5,000 words is a lot of words, especially when you consider how few weeks we have our students in our classes and how many words can we possibly teach in a single week. So if we try to do the quick math, let's say we take the number of words learners need, 5,000, divided by the number of weeks of school, and then because half the words will be forgotten by many students by the next week, we need to multiply that by 2. And then we have an equation for how many words we need each week. And again, we're back in panic and despair, but how can we possibly do that? However, if we can decrease the amount of forgetting and provide ways students can learn new words on their own, there's not only hope, but there is a new delight of seeing the world of our words expanding in all directions, not just down a list, but a web of vocabulary that grows instead of dissolving, being forgotten. So I would say the question is not, can we use critical thinking to teach vocabulary, but rather, how can we teach enough vocabulary without it?
Well, so this is very comforting because we have a lot of participants typing in that, wow, 5,000 word families is still quite a bit. So everyone, I'm sure, is very excited to learn what's coming next.
Okay, so we're going to try a quick vocabulary learning exercise in using critical thinking. Let's see how it works out. Let's go and get started. Now, if you're participating in this webinar with other people, work with 2 or 3 of them for this activity, so it seems more like a class activity. And now, whether you're working on your own or in that small group, let's look at these very basic word cards for early learners. Now, you might see right away that all the words belong together. But if you look again, you might also see that some words go together better than others. Now, because we have limited time, we only have about a minute or so to do this. But I'd like you to take those 8 words and with your friends around you, divide them into 2 groups of words that fit together. Now, if we were in a class, the learners would simply be moving strips of paper into 2 piles. Your word piles can, but do not need to have the same number of words. I guess you'll have to use a list since you all have cards.
All right, everyone. So think about how some of these words might go together and create 2 different lists.
Yeah, and using your chat box, share the words that you have in just one of your lists.
All right, we'd love to hear from everybody. I think people are still kind of thinking.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Dog, lion, and wolf.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Interesting. Dog and cat from Fatima. We have Jose saying sheep, giraffe, and goat.
Sheep, giraffe. Oh, these are very interesting. Now, these are all excellent lists of words. And you can all find reasons why they might fit together well. But now I'm going to ask you to do something strange. You just barely finished that. We're moving on to the second step. And I'd like you to take this same group of 8 words and now arrange them in a second group of a pair of lists. So now move them into a different way, the same words into different groups of words.
Well, that's kind of challenging. We'd love to hear what you guys think. Can you make 2 different lists? Right.
How else can you put them together? So again, just share with us one of those lists if you can.
Seema says giraffe, lion, and wolf at the zoo. And Gisela says a wolf and sheep.
Okay, the wolf and sheep, interesting ones. These are great ones. So let's step back and evaluate and reflect. Do the words from your first arrangement or your second arrangement fit better? Now, to answer that question, let's go on to the next slide. Before you try to answer that one, I'd like you to again sort of step back. Because what happens is that to answer that question, you have to go to another level. You have to identify the idea that unifies the words, and then a contrasting word for the other part. So, for example, if you would put lion, cat, dog, and wolf together, you would need to ask yourself, so what do they all share? What brings them together? Now, the other cards that will be left over will be giraffe, goat, sheep, and cow. We should use this example, and that would be a contrast idea. And teaching words in contrasting pairs helps the mind organize itself and remember even larger groups of words. Now, you may have put those words together because they all, for example, well, they all eat meat. And you might know the word carnivore. But what will your students do who don't know that word? You will see them in their groups pointing to their sharp teeth or using their native language. At this point, the idea is that you become their dictionary. Teach them the question, what is the English word for? And they can point to their teeth and say sharp teeth. And all these animals have sharp teeth. Once you've answered the question by providing the word they sought, teach them the sentence something like, all these are sharp tooth or carnivores.
Great.
Now a different group of learners will, of course, have different pairs of words or groupings of words. So this one, like someone in our chat said the exact same thing, the giraffe, the lion, and the wolf. And you'd be asking, what brings them all together? And then the words that are left out, dog, cat, goat, sheep, and cow, would have a contrasting idea. Now, so the person in the chat had this wonderful idea that these all belong in a zoo. And there are other ways to talk about them. They're wild or something, okay? Now, this is a very different grouping than the one right before that, and those are meat eaters or grass eaters or something of that sort. But just as interesting and just as useful way to think about them is this grouping here. And because you'll be having this in public in class discussions, all your students will now have different ways to organize the same words. And that's very useful in remembering. Now, stepping back again to see what you just did, my goodness, with very simple words, your learners would have engaged in some very high level thinking. Now you've been analyzing, perceiving patterns, engaging in problem solving, and you've been working together, you've been cooperating and negotiating. And then by answering which range was better, you were evaluating. Now, if you gave your students word cards like these for sorting new vocabulary, do you think that even your beginning students would be able to do something like what you just did?
What do you think, everybody? Do you think your beginning students could do this activity? And I just want to say, I can't believe we did all of those things with such a pretty simple activity. That's really great. Iftkar says, yes, they can do it. And pretty much everyone else says, yes, I think that we could do this. Syed says, yes, with lots of exclamation points.
Well, that sounds great. I'm so glad to hear that. And we'll see how this might be able to be used in other ways also. Okay, now it's important to realize what we did. So again, reflecting on it. Now, while you were sorting cards and discussing where to put a word, you most likely needed to say and read each word multiple times. And by thinking of where each one belonged, you thought of them in several different ways. Now, if it's true, as researchers claim, then in order not to forget words right after the vocabulary quiz, and to be able to use those new words productively, learners need to use each new word between 6 and 10 times in different ways. 6 to 10. Now, if we took 10 minutes for this kind of vocabulary activity, we'd already have gone a long way to adding those words to your learners' permanent vocabulary. Now, you had used each word multiple times in different contexts, but just as importantly, when you asked your learners to figure out what brought the words together, you're helping your learners create a conceptual order. And that's a bigger idea where each specific word can fit. So researchers say that by creating categories, it's vital for retaining a large number of items in our memory. If you provide these students with the word carnivore, you might be surprised to find that that word too would be retained. Whether you gave them the word carnivore or meat eater or sharp tooth, you provided a name for a concept that they had discovered on their own. And when a word gives learners an answer for their question rather than ours, they tend to absorb it into their active vocabulary. Now, I admit, this kind of learning, of course, it seems out of order. We're introducing a scientific 3-syllable word in a beginner's lesson. Yet even though it is out of order in one sense, it works because it helps learners create their own order, a name for a concept they notice. These organizational title words provide a place in memory for words for other sharp-toothed animals that come later, like tiger or shark or Tyrannosaurus rex. And if you ask your students what else might fit in that pile of words in the same concept category, their vocabulary begins to grow organically.
And to your point, Anna says, yes, if students become interested, they're usually good at problem solving. So that lends more to the learning process.
Right, and this is all about problem solving, our problems as well as theirs. The thing is, our brains are wired into a web. It's a web pattern of neurons. And each time we learn something, they become somewhat rewired. With critical thinking vocabulary activities, the word is being learned in the same way that the brain is wired with its neurons in a complex, interconnected, and three-dimensional web. And what's wonderful is that we'll be surprised. We will be surprised at the variety of correct answers. I hadn't thought of zoo, for example. Having multiple correct answers frees students from the fear of having the wrong answer, a terror that leaves so many students afraid to speak up, and so prevents them from actually practicing and improving the language they're learning. By fearlessly seeking the best words for their concepts, their vocabulary web will continue growing in many directions, and not just during your class time. Each time one of your students sees or hears about another animal, they're going to stop and wonder what group it belongs to. And this question will lead to more learning. Now, the activity we just tried is best used in small groups, at least 2, but it's best, I think, with 3 to 5. See, that's enough where there are several minds who are stimulating each other, sparking new ideas, but not so many that students can passively sit and watch. Every student will have a chance to say and read each word many times. And because these words are pieces of paper that they can move around in word cards, they don't need to have very extensive speaking skills. The groups can even make their own cards in the beginning of the lesson, just following your teacher's direction. That can actually be better because they have to look at the letters and spell them out. They will expand on whatever skills they have. As they struggle and they succeed, explaining the reasons for putting words in one group rather than another. And over time, these positive group behaviors are internalized into individual learning strategies. So it's a very good thing that they will carry on with that. And I should add that I developed these small group activities for large multi-level classes. And I've used them with classes of more than 100 students. As long as you break your activity into small steps, each with short, clear instructions, the size and diversity of the class actually works to make these lessons work even better. So large class sizes can make this a better learning activity.
That's great to know. We have some feedback from our audience. Noreen and Nilam both say that fear is debilitating in the classroom and it kind of does inhibit learning. And Sergio says that it's also a major problem among his students. They don't like to talk because they have a fear of getting the wrong answers or not pronouncing things correctly.
Yeah, exactly. And here what we have is that there are many correct answers. So that's really a useful thing. And they can, and again, they can be things that we haven't even thought of ourselves as teachers. Let's go on to another activity. And it's sort of related, but instead what we do here is we have to decide which word of these do not belong. So we have chicken and dinosaur and bat, and you need to take away one and leave the best pair. Which one would you take out and why?
Right. So everyone, which word does not belong? Can you share in the chat box? And why? Yeah. This is kind of tough. They're all so different. All right, everybody. So we have participants kind of all over the place. We have some saying chicken, others saying bat. We have a couple saying dinosaur. So we have the whole spectrum. And
that's great. And as you thought of why, I'm sure you have all good reasons, as your students would. There is no really wrong answer here. Again, dealing with that fear problem. Mm-hmm. See, some people, for example, they would take away dinosaur because both chickens and bats have wings, right? But the thing is that many young learners have interests that we may not even be aware of. For example, a lot of them really know a lot about dinosaurs. And someone, next slide, whoop, whoop, there. Someone might know that birds actually evolved from dinosaurs. You can see that in the picture because of the strange way that the chicken leg is backwards from our legs, and then the dinosaurs are identical. And then we can keep on playing with this. So if we, I think, yeah, there we go. And then, but then we could play with this and we could replace chicken with another word. So in this case, whale, dinosaur, and bat. Now, which one would you take away and why?
All right, we have someone saying dinosaur because they're extinct. That's a great answer.
That's a good answer, yeah.
Yeah, we have lots of people saying bat. I'm thinking that might be because it's so much smaller than dinosaurs and whales.
Right. And,
That because it flies.
and we could take away any of them and find a good reason. And, for example, that thing about, well, taking away the bat, because we think of dinosaur and whale as really big and bats as small, as you just said. But some learners, again, might know that whales and bats are both mammals. And so they will take away the dinosaur. See, the things that our students are learning in other classes will suddenly walk in the English class door as connections are made. Now, if that door between different subjects is opened by such discussions, maybe, just maybe, it won't close behind our kids when they leave our class and forget too much of what we just taught. Then instead of having only 1 hour of English, they will have a day when English is being discovered and practiced. And once again, there are many correct answers. The fear of mistakes is overcome by imagination and creativity and outside knowledge that they become proud to realize that they possess. The words so far that we've used have all been nouns. But the question, can this activity be used with other kinds of words? I would say that so long as learners have a very basic definition for the word, but we provided that definition just with a picture there. But as long as they have even the simplest definition, 2-word definitions, they can be asked to sort any kinds of new words. Each time they look at how words fit with others, they need to think about what that word means in a deeper way. The simple definition of verbs, adjectives, place it on the map or from any source, begins to expand. And the criteria for sorting the words is not restricted to definitions. Learners might notice, for example, the number of syllables. For example, lion and giraffe have 2 syllables, and the other ones only had 1. And so they're noticing aspects of language that are very powerful and necessary for them to be successful. Or they might notice the part of speech if they're mixed together, or the register, that these words were very informal, those were very scientific, and sort them in that way. Then when learners are asked to create a second arrangement and actually explain which arrangement is better, it's going to be tough, but it's going to spark a friendly competition for the most innovative groupings. Someone suddenly sees something and says, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and Fatima says this is a great activity, and you probably get a lot of comments and conversation from different answers from all of your students. So I imagine your class is always pretty lively.
And that's the idea. You end up with your students' minds are enlivened. Mm-hmm. And you might find, for example, that there was a quiet child in the back of your class who never spoke. You find that she might not even know that she came from the city from the countryside. But in her group, she might say that in that first group of words, that dog, sheep, goat, and wolf all belong together. Why? Because the dog protects the sheep and goats from the wolf. And the city child might say, I never thought of that. That is, if you can get people to say, I never thought of that, their minds are awake now. This kind of activity produces surprises. And surprises, unlike lists and rules, are not forgotten. If we as teachers have been doing the same lesson for years, let's face it, we can use some surprises ourselves. New ways of looking at old things and material that bring discovery and enjoyment back to our work life. So the critical thing is for both of us, teachers as well as students.
Yeah, and Gonzalez says it involves the whole class. So that's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, very good point, yeah. Until our students get used to these activities and learn how to work more effectively and enjoyably in groups, they might take a little more time, but only at first. Soon you'll be seeing that they're actually far more time efficient at expanding students' usable vocabulary. Each time, every word has been pronounced and read and explored many times as they discuss its connections and contrasts with others. There will be less forgetting. And because learners help create those concept categories, carnivore and such, they will have links for the next group of words an ever-expanding mind web. Now, this sorting and resorting is best used as a regular activity because in doing so, students will get in the habit of looking with their critical minds and weaving webs with each new word they encounter, both in your class and in other classes, both in school and out, wherever they encounter new words in reading, or films, or advertisements, or in hip-hop songs, wherever it might be. With activated minds, they become collaborators in theirs and their peers' learning. All right, we've gone through that quickly, but let's now move on to critical thinking for grammar learning. See, grammar, as you know, is a central focus in many of your curricula, and perhaps is such a challenge because you might be teaching ways that only certain kinds of learners can successfully absorb. See, critical thinking works the ways our brains are structured, a structure that is quick to perceive existing patterns and recognize possible new patterns. Now, as we move on to grammar learning, we'll look at a related but a kind of strange way that our brains work that we can use to improve learning. So you could say that the brain struggles in two directions. In one direction, it constantly and unconsciously checks and reaffirms the expected order, quickly recognizing patterns that have served it well. We see this in the way we don't need to read every letter of a familiar sight word. So we just know we can see the length of it, first and last, and that's sufficient. Or even a crowd. We can hear a garbled common phrase and know exactly what was said and say, fine, thank you, to answer appropriately. But in the other direction, the brain is forever drawn to anomalies. And anomalies are the new unexpected things that grab perception's attention, that jump out from the background because by definition, anomalies break the pattern. Anomalies can be the unnatural word order that just sounds wrong to people who have become familiar with it, or say using street slang in a formal situation. Critical thinking deepens our learning by helping us notice what fits in the pattern as well as what breaks it. Now, because you know the expected pattern of grammar, the rules, your ears quickly prick up when there are grammatical mistakes. So my question is, so what do you feel when your students make grammatical mistakes?
All right, everybody, how do you feel when your students make grammatical mistakes? And while we're waiting on some answers, some participants are just commenting on group work and how it's really effective for communicating and, you know, making sure that information taught is actively engaged with the students.
I'm a big advocate of group work.
Yeah. Ruzana specifically says that group activities encourage students to repeat the vocabulary 6 to 10 times, like you mentioned. So it looks like what you're sharing with us is really resonating with the audience. Ekash said, of course, they feel a little bit ashamed. Ruzana says she doesn't correct because she doesn't want to distract them. Some teachers say they feel angry. Other teachers say they feel inspired to change up the teaching techniques.
Right.
Lots of different answers.
You sound like a wonderful group of people with so many different approaches, very humane, I must say. You know, people feel sometimes teachers can get very frustrated. Sometimes they can give up. Sometimes they get angry and say, our students are so lazy, they haven't done their work. But the question is, like, what we can do about that. Now, sometimes we actually sort of feel almost like a pain. It just hurts to hear these mistakes. Or maybe we just feel panic because we know the test is coming up. But let's see what we can do about that. Now, the way I would look at it is that grammar rules are really descriptions of a pattern. When we hear our students break those patterns, that kind of hurts our ears, that anomaly. Now, I often hear teachers tell me that they keep on correcting, but too many learners keep making the same mistake. It's not internalized. It doesn't go deeper. However, if we can make our students hear grammatical mistakes as jarringly or irritatingly as we do, they will learn to self-correct. To do this, we must ask them to notice the patterns of grammar. Now, the activity we're about to try exploits a strange quirk. I love that word. Quirk is an oddity of the human brain. And it uses it to raise awareness of a rule, or more correctly, a grammatical pattern. But before we get onto that, I need to ask, so do any of you use dictation activities in your classes? And for what purpose if you do? If you don't know what dictation, that means you don't use it, so that's fine.
All right, everybody, let us know. Do you use dictation activities and why? Let's see, waiting on some comments to come in. We are getting a lot of yeses. They use it for spelling, for grammar. Yeah, lots of people are saying yes, they do use them.
Right, and frequently is used for a listening activity, to listen more precisely, and certainly for spelling. And the way I understand dictation is normally done, it has this characteristic of a teacher speaks one sentence at a time, and then the students copy that sentence individually, one at a time, and then the teacher goes on to the next one. Now we're going to actually do something called a Dictogloss. And you could say it's a kind of dictation, but with significant differences. Now, Dictoglosses have been used by teachers in different ways since about 1990, and there are several variants. This one uses some of those oddities of the brain in order to surprise our students in discovering new grammatical features, and in being surprised, discover our grammar is more than just rules, that grammar is a meaning-making pattern. Now, as we did with our vocabulary activity, we're going to try this out with an example that shows how critical thinking can be enlisted to learn basic concepts. Now, in this case, we'll assume that your students have been only using the simple present. Now, of course, we all know that the simple present isn't always that simple. It can be confusing where to put the S after the verb. But in the hierarchy of a curriculum, that's usually what we teach first. However, now your curriculum says it's time to introduce the simple future. Instead of drawing timelines on the board and having students copy model sentences, let's try a Dictogloss. Now, as the teacher, you are going to end up providing a simple paragraph in the target tense, but not yet. Keep in mind that the paragraph you choose for this activity should only have vocabulary that students have already heard, and in this activity on verb tense, using time words such as after and then are important to use. This is what we'll do. Okay, we're going to start by arranging students in those small groups. Now, I would say pairs can work, but groups of 3 or 4 work even better. Now, you're going to ask everyone to listen very closely as you read out loud an entire short paragraph, not just one sentence at a time as an dictation. Then read it a second time. If anyone needs to hear it a third time, provide that reading. It's a short paragraph. Then, ask the students to choose one person as their scribe. The scribe is the role of a person who just writes down what the others decide. She doesn't tell people what they should write. She just puts down the group's words on paper. So there's no pressure on that person. Now, ask the groups to write down the entire paragraph as exactly as they can remember, all working together to feed lines to the scribe. Now, of course, one student might remember one part very clearly, another student is sure of a different phrase or a sentence, but together they put the paragraph together. Give them a set amount of time, maybe 5 minutes or so. The amount of time depends upon the length of the paragraph and your understanding of your students. But a relatively short time is actually best because it keeps everyone focused, and time limits, just like in sports, add drama to an activity or in games. Now, because all of you already know this simple feature, I can't have you actually try this because I can't surprise you. Instead, I will just show you what learners who do not know that tense will typically do. So here we go. This is what I will read slowly and clearly 2 times. I will have a busy day today. First, I'll eat breakfast at home, then I'll walk to school. At school, I will go to class all morning, and then I'll eat lunch. After lunch, we'll have some time outside. And by the way, of course, you would adjust this for the lives of your students to make it as real as possible. What happens if you read this aloud to your students who have never had a lesson on the simple future? I wonder what they would write. Because I know I was really surprised when I first used this and did not expect what they ended up producing. Because after your groups have used their time to write and then perfect their text, as you walk around class, you will most likely see something they have written that looks like this. And look at this. It says, I have a busy day today. First, I eat breakfast at home. Then I walk to school. At school, I go to class all morning, and then I eat lunch. After lunch, we have some time outside. See, the surprising thing is, next please. Surprising thing is, there may not be any mistakes at all in what they wrote. It's perfectly correct English. It simply sticks with the simple present that they already know. Of course, some of your students might have spelling mistakes, punctuation mistakes, but what you will most likely find that almost all of it will be missing will and apostrophe LL. The pattern they know, the simple present, is all they heard. And this is because—
We have a lot of comments coming in just to break a
Sure.
little bit. Amar says this really strengthens students' abilities both in their writing, but also in widening their imagination. Monica says Dictogloss helps students to be more aware of what they're writing. That's
Right.
interesting. And Nazreen says, wow, excellent activity, Dictogloss. They're going to use it in their class as soon as possible.
Wonderful. I'd love to hear how it works out. But the reason this is happening, it was a puzzle to me. I wasn't expecting this. But it's because the strange thing about the human brain, it just considers what is important and ignores what it doesn't. So what it decides is important creates a kind of filter or a net, and that lets all the rest slip through unnoticed. Here, that net of expectations caught the big fish of eat breakfast or go to class, but let the little indicators of the future test, will, and apostrophe LL, slip through like invisible water, because it didn't recognize them as important. Our work now is to help them reweave the net to catch the new grammar. By the way, this language blindness is very common. Most English speakers have trouble hearing the tonal differences in Mandarin, even though they change the word's meaning entirely. Now, though you, let's go on to the next one. Now, though you, the teacher, will of course see that these words are missing and be tempted to correct it, the key is that you say nothing about it, at least not yet. Instead, when all the groups have written and had an extra minute to look over and perfect what they have written, you simply write on the board and have the scribe copy it for the group. Or if you have the opportunity and the publication possibilities, hand each a strip of paper, one per group, with the exact words you have spoken.
Great, and we have lots of participants chiming in and saying this is a great activity, very useful. It makes students more aware and concentrated. And Nalim says the mind is like a net. Good one. So
right, exactly. Okay. Now then, you're asked each group to look at it very carefully, compare it to their work, and find every difference between your words and what they had written really closely. Ask them to circle or underline every difference. Now those differences, actually you'll see there's a moment where they don't see it at first, and then suddenly they'll all jump out at them, and they'll see one after another. And soon I think many groups will see that link between will and apostrophe LL. Now once the differences, and here we see how that might look. We're marking on both sides the one underlying was missing, showing where they belong in the other one. And you'll see students poking their finger here and there, saying here, 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 and they're getting activated. Okay, now after they've marked all those differences, ask a group to select a spokesperson. Now, a spokesperson should be someone different from the scribe, we're moving the authority around the group so everyone has a chance. And these are well scaffolded roles so it doesn't cause any anxiety. Now, working together as a group, ask them to answer two questions. First, what are the differences between what you read to them and what they wrote? And two, how the difference between what they wrote and what you spoke make a difference. Why do these missing elements matter? You ask the group to prepare to present their ideas to the rest of the class. So you have to give them enough time to discuss it and prepare the spokesperson so that they can share it with the class exactly their ideas of it. Now, as your learners prepare to answer why the difference between their text and your text made a difference, they're going to start asking, when did these things happen? By asking when, they are creating for themselves a theory of how verb tense works, and more specifically, how to create a sense of the future in English. Now, this might lead to all kinds of other discussions, like whether will or apostrophe LL make a difference, should they be one or the other? It doesn't matter what they're discussing because they're all going to deepen their understanding. And of course, then they'll add that to what the rest of the class is thinking later. Now, as they present, the important thing is to allow students to hypothesize and let other students challenge those hypotheses. Now, when I say hypothesize, I mean to let them make carefully considered guesses based upon the information they have, the difference between those two things. They're acting like scientists. By making these guesses and testing them on different sentences in the vocabulary, they are making sense, not just following rules someone else told them. Now, you will be the class scribe during this time, writing their ideas on the board and gently shaping them and formulating a class consensus and clear conclusion. This is how the simple future tense works. But they must feel that this is their discovery. You're just being the scribe. They own this rule. They possess it. And they will never forget it if they own it. It sticks to their neck. They have discovered a pattern they can now follow when you ask them, okay, so what will you do after school? And now they can write that either as a group if there's more time in class or at home as a project there. They have been discoverers. They have been explorers in the world of English.
And De La Cruz says we have to learn something new by making mistakes.
Right, exactly. Again, you'll have to overcome that fear of mistakes, which you are all showing by being part of this webinar. A Dictogloss opens a learner's eyes so they notice what they had not seen before. And they wonder, why is it so? And then they discern a pattern in what had been ignored. The water that passed invisibly through their nets is now visible and available to make meaning. Dictoglosses like this one can be used for many aspects of grammar and mechanics, not just for verb tenses, but also for pronouns and capitalization, punctuation. It asks your learners to listen and look closely, to see that your version had, for example, a little comma, and then ask why that needs to be there, how it makes things clear, and how it changes or adds to meaning. And as with vocabulary, your students will best remember these answers because they're answers to their own questions. Now, the hardest thing about developing and using your students' critical thinking skills is trusting them as thinkers whose minds are not so different from our own. Like us, their minds are trying to make sense of the world. Now, we as teachers, when we make the mistake sometimes thinking we have all the best questions and all the best answers. And sure, we have worked hard to have both. But for all our efforts, we sometimes see our students fail to learn or forget what they just learned, what we just taught them. Critical thinking engages their minds in the learning process, not just as receivers of knowledge, but as creators of understanding. Now, we need to keep quiet while some of this is happening. That's hard for teachers. We're talkers. But letting students think, speak, and as we said, make their own mistakes does not mean that we're failing to do our jobs. It means that our jobs must be slightly redefined. So instead, next. Next. Okay, so instead of pouring the concrete of knowledge into their heads, we must become architects of learning. We design situations where meaningful and deep learning can take place. So the idea is not to spend their precious teaching time to make concrete harden in their heads rules, but rather to help learners weave flexible nets that they can use to catch deeper understanding and grow the web-like connections between their brain's neurons. Critical thinking makes everyone a better learner and a better teacher. And it helps us notice what we've missed and ask better questions, make better guesses, and know how to check them, and see how things fit together and perceive bigger patterns in the vibrant, ever-changing, ever-growing English language. So the question is, then, the big one that matters. Are you excited? Are you ready to start?
We have a lot of people chiming in, and Edward says, thanks for helping me with my next class. So I think he definitely is ready to use these activities. Sahar says, thank you, really useful. Neelam says, I will try this Dictogloss activity. Tasif says, I will apply this in my class, and the list goes on. A lot of people are excited to try.
I am so happy. As teachers, we sometimes think we're giving a good lesson, but if it's not received, it doesn't matter. So I encourage you to give it all a try. Critical thinking, it's a powerful tool, but it's nothing scary. It's a muscle we all have. If we use it, get stronger and stronger. Our minds maybe they don't start to fly. But in lessons where our learners once crawled, we might see them start to dance. So I want to thank you so much for helping me weave this web with you all, and I'm grateful to have been connected to you for this 1 hour.
All right, thank you so much, Richard, for all of these practical strategies for incorporating critical thinking into our vocabulary and grammar instruction.